Hello, and welcome to Tradition and Truth, where we explore theology, philosophy, and we explore into world history and some of the world's greatest civilizations. And today, I want to explore one of the world's most famous and greatest civilizations to ever exist. Let's talk about the very beginning of the human species. Let's talk about Egypt. We're going to talk about Egyptian history and religion, all the way from the pharaohs of the Old Kingdom until today of the Roman era and today. Egypt was home to one of the longest lasting religious traditions in world history. It had polytheistic and monotheistic movements throughout time, so it worshipped multiple gods as well as one singular god. Let's dive into it. We're going to talk about the origins of Egyptian religion, the major gods and goddesses of Egypt and their significance. We're going to talk about Akhenaten's revolution and the monotheistic movements throughout Egypt, and the Greco-Roman influence throughout Egyptian history, and how Christianity eventually took root and replaced the old gods. If you like theology and philosophy and answering the deep questions of existential crisis, hit that subscribe button, turn the notification bell on, because you're going to get tons of videos from me, and we're going to dive into some really awesome subjects. So the oldest history that we can document or find comes from about 5,000 years BC. So that would be about 7,000 years ago from today's time. And that's one of the oldest religions in the world, with Zoroastrianism and Hinduism being the oldest documented outside of shamanistic practices, of course. These documents come from a pre-dynastic era or period, and that's from 4,000 to 3,100 BC. See, Egypt's religion was deeply tied into nature and the Nile River. And why would it not be? Because at this time, during most paganistic style religions, everything circled around seasonal change and how to explain natural phenomenon. And the Nile River would have had a ton of natural phenomenon. And we'll dive into that more in another video, but there's some really cool historical records that talk about the Nile and some of the crazy things that's happened to it. The Nile River turned into blood. And no, I'm not talking about just the Exodus in the Bible. So the polytheistic religions of Egypt at the time, they studied multiple different gods of nature, force, order, and these were mostly to just explain, as in all pagan religions, and just to kind of clump them together, which may be somewhat of an oversimplification, but just to keep it easy, that's what it was. It was used to describe the natural phenomenon of the world. It helped with raising crops and when should we work and when should we prepare for a harsh or colder season. It also greatly helped with social order, because one of the key tenets or principles to any kind of world history that shows advanced civilization is an organized religion. Were the pharaohs worshipped like gods? They certainly were divine figures. Most pharaohs were believed to be sons of God, and this was to keep the bloodline going and an order of control. And this would be represented by Horus in life and Osiris in death. So Maat, M-A-A-T, and my linguistic skills are pretty subpar, so if I mispronounce anything, please forgive me. So Maat was the cosmic order. The concept of Maat was truth, justice, and harmony. He controlled both life and the afterlife. Who were the major gods and goddesses of the Egyptian culture? That's something we definitely need to dive into. As Egypt became a powerful kingdom, its religious pantheon expanded greatly. As you increased your pharaohs, and each pharaoh would have different control, and maybe they wanted to implement new things, and one of the best ways to implement control into a kingdom that's deeply religious is to make it about religion. Some of the most well-documented or well-known figures within the Egyptian hierarchy of gods or goddesses are as followed. Ra, which is the sun god. What is Ra known for? Ra was the chief deity. This is similar to like Zeus, or like the highest. This is the alpha. He was known for representing the sun, creation, and kingship. The pharaoh at the time was known to be the living representation of Ra, maintaining balance. Then you have Osiris, which is the lord of the underworld. Osiris, similar to Hades, ruled the afterlife. This represents, well, just as it is, an afterlife or eternal living. In all religion, we want to explain what happens when we die, and you'll find in most of these mythos that are polytheistic, you have a god of life and a god of death. Osiris was murdered by Set and then resurrected by Isis. This became a central focus on Egyptian belief systems for justice and judgment. So it kind of gave some hope for those who maybe thought that they were living a bad life or something similar. Then you have the mother goddess, Isis. Isis was known to be a very powerful figure of magic and motherhood. And Isis was worshipped far, far, far beyond Egypt. Isis even influenced Christianity and Greco-Roman iconography. That's a hard word to say, but you know what I mean. Then you have the guardian of the dead, known as Anubis. Anubis was identified as having a jackal head and mummification. Anubis was well known for guiding souls into the afterlife, similar to Michael row your boat ashore, or Charon or Charon that rows you across the river Styx. That's what Anubis's role was, the transition into the afterlife. Then you have the hidden one, Amun. Amun became the supreme god during the New Kingdom, and this would have been from 1550 to 1070 BC. Amun merged with Ra as Amun-Ra, king of the gods. So you have a central figure coming into power, and I will cover this individual deity more in detail later on, but it's very important to the history of Egyptian monotheistic culture. In conclusion, the Egyptian religion was insanely vast, very complex, and was one of the best well-documented religious cultures in history. And it lasted well over a millennia. Let's talk about the first monotheistic movement in Akhenaten. One pharaoh named Akhenaten traditionally changed the entire system. Now, throughout Egyptian history, we know that it was mostly polytheistic, but there was one pharaoh that changed it into a monotheistic religion. Akhenaten lived between 1353 to 1336 BC, and they introduced the monotheistic revolution. So Akhenaten abandoned the traditional gods completely and declared Aten, or the sun disk, the one true god, changing Egyptian history forever. He closed the temples to worship the polytheistic hierarchy of gods and goddesses. And then he moved the capital to Akhenaten, or modern-day Amarna. His reforms were very controversial. And honestly, after his death, Egypt returned to polytheism, and they completely erased his legacy, returning to polytheistic religion. This is one of the earliest known state-imposed monotheistic religious movements that we have documented. Obviously there's the Israeli god of Yahweh that was very monotheistic and would have dated before this, but again, being that Egypt had such a vast culture and such a large religious movement in general, this was pretty big. Greek and Roman religion in Egypt. So Egypt fell eventually, and they fell under Greek and Roman rule. This would have been 332 BC to 395 AD. Its religious landscape changed dramatically during this time, and it's important to note how that went. So this was very similar in a lot of cultures in the way they did this, but the Greek rulers at the time merged the Egyptian gods with Greek deities because the similarities were already there. As I mentioned earlier, you have Charon or Charon who carries you across the river Styx, and so you have Anubis who does the same thing. And one of the best ways to explain this is that, hey, maybe it's just a different name. Maybe your culture just calls him this, but it's the same god. It's a great way to merge your religions together. So then you have Zeus Ammon or Serapis, and these are documented records. And then one of the saddest things in history is the Library of Alexandria that, man, I wish would not have been burnt. And that's something that most people are still not over. But this became a center of philosophical and religious syncretism. Then you had the Roman influence, and that happened from 30 BC to 395 AD. Romans continued the Egyptian temple worship, but they did favor the imperial cults. But around this time, Christianity began to spread. You have to think that this was right before Jesus Christ or Yeshua walked the earth. And if that happened, then within 100 to 200 years afterwards, you have all the letters written, and then the church has been formed. And so yes, Christianity began to spread widely. There was tons of prosecution, martyrdom, and so forth, but again, it still spread. How did that influence Egyptian culture? This is actually the final phase of Egypt's religious history that we have because it's still in effect today. This was the spread of Christianity, and it did replace the old gods. The spread of Christianity happened from the 1st to the 4th century AD. Saint Mark is traditionally believed to have brought Christianity to Alexandria in the 1st century AD. Egypt actually became one of the centers to Christianity thought or Christian thought. There was theologians like Origen and Athanasius, and they shaped Christian doctrine. Then you have the Edict of Milan, which was written in 313 AD, and the Edict of Milan legalized Christianity. Then later you have something known as the Edict of Theodosius, that was written in 399 or 391 AD. That outlawed pagan worship. So former religions from Egypt at that time could not have existed any longer. They were polytheistic and considered pagan because they were not Christian. Many Egyptian churches were later repurposed as churches and monasteries to help form the rise of Coptic Christianity. Now, I do have to state that within Christianity, obviously, there is 90% Sunni Muslim as a population in Egypt today as of 2025, and only 10% are Christian. So there was a fall off eventually. There is like less than 1% of the population that's like Dawoodi Muslim and a couple other smaller sects. I don't know much about them and I need to learn more, so maybe we'll do a video in the future on them as I learn. From the pharaohs to the rise of Christianity, Egypt's history, Egypt's religious history, is a continuous story of transformation. It began with paganistic style religions with polytheistic gods that were explaining simple like natural designs of life, death, seasons, etc. Then you had a monotheistic movement, and then later polytheistic again, and then Christianity came in, and now Muslim control. It's a vast history. What are your thoughts on Egypt's spiritual legacy? I mean, it's written about in Exodus so many times. The Bible references history. Archaeologists suspect that life began in that area. Like, Egypt has such a vast history for humankind. I want to hear what you have to say in the comments below. Let me know if you have any questions, if you agree, or if you disagree on anything I said in this video. Look, I'm human. Sometimes I get things wrong. I do reference all of my material, and that stuff will be left in the description. However, if you think of anything that I left out or I could add or whatever, let me know in the comments, and I'd be happy to fact check it and throw it into a future video for you. As that being said, thanks guys for watching Tradition and Truth. My name is Walker, and I appreciate you diving into religious history of Egypt with me. Make sure you hit that like button so other people get notified of this video also. Subscribe for future videos, and leave a comment letting me know what you think. Have a blessed day.